Hi, this video is the first in a series that attempts to outline the metaphysical basis for community building. By community, I mean any group of people with a shared love. So that could be a family, an organization, a sports team, a company, even a country, and anything in between. It makes sense to focus firstly on outlining the foundations of a community properly, because without that, anything built on top of it will fail over time. In this video, I will attempt to address the question of what it means to be, and to the best of my ability, explain why being is the most universal concept that underpins everything. At its most basic definition, being means that which is. It is the broadest and most fundamental concept in our thinking. Everything that exists, in whatever way, shares in being. A rock is, a thought is, a person is. Even when we try to imagine nothing, we find it impossible to truly conceive of absolute non-being. You can try it now. Any attempt to picture nothingness smuggles in a faint image of something, like an empty space, and that, of course, is not truly nothing. This shows how inescapable the idea of being is. It's the starting point of all our reasoning, because one must be and use being concepts even to deny something. Being is also universal. It applies to everything we can talk or even think about. Every particular thing, whether that be you, me, a tree, or a star, is different in terms of what it is, but all share the property that it is. This common aspect of existence underlies every difference in those things. So being is rightly called the most universal concept. It does not answer what a thing is, whether that be its nature or essence, but affirms that it is. The universality of being makes it a primary object of inquiry. If we misunderstand being, we will misunderstand everything built upon it. At this point, some people might argue that this is just all semantic quibbling. Being sounds like a vague term that philosophers use to manipulate without any practical value. So why bother defining it so carefully? Well, this objection misunderstands exactly what's at stake. Being is not an invented label or arbitrary convention. It is the most universal concept, and it's unavoidable in every assertion, denial, or question. To reject or even doubt anything presupposes the intelligibility of being. For example, saying unicorns do not exist affirms the being of the statement, the concept, and the speaker's act of judgment. So even denying the being of something relies on the being of other things. If being were just semantics without any objective reference, then all claims, including scientific or skeptical claims, would collapse into incoherence. There would be no basis for distinguishing truth from falsehood if our fundamental categories had no traction on reality. Therefore, clarifying the concept of being is not just clever wordplay. It is the necessary foundation for any meaningful discourse or inquiry. And denying its importance is self-defeating because the very act of denial actually affirms it. But even after all this, you may still be wondering why we should even care about what being is at all. It perhaps still seems too abstract. But any question about what ought to be, whether that is morality, justice, or purpose, or how anything can exist or change, presupposes an understanding of what it means to be. If we're confused about reality at the most basic level, then any structure of knowledge or ethics we build will be shaky and eventually collapse. Even then though, someone might argue, why do we need this metaphysical analysis at all? Science already explains how things exist, change, and interact. Isn't that enough? Well, this objection confuses how questions with why questions in the deepest sense. Science offers models describing regularities of change among existing things, but it presupposes the being of its objects and the intelligibility of their relations. Science cannot, even in principle, answer why anything exists rather than nothing. Its explanations are conditional. Event A causes event B under given conditions, but it does not explain why there is any A or B at all. Scientific models also depend on stable laws and entities whose existence is taken for granted. The question of why these laws or entities exist at all rather than being nothing lies outside empirical method. So, metaphysics addresses this by asking what existence itself actually is, and why contingent beings require causes outside themselves. Without this inquiry, science would be reduced to describing patterns in a brute, unexplained reality, and as a result undermine its claim to offer understanding rather than just description. So knowing what it means to be is foundational. For example, before we can determine what is good, which falls under the realm of ethics, we must know what is, which is dealt with by metaphysics. A just, prosperous, and strong community must be grounded in reality, in truths about human beings and the world. So this inquiry is not just idle speculation, it really is the starting point for all further understanding. If we want to know what is morally right, or what human dignity is, we need to be clear about being itself. So, that's it for this first video on being, the most universal concept. If you found it helpful or interesting, please give it a like, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell so you can be notified for the other videos that I'm making. Thank you, and catch you for the next one.